Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth. This program features in-depth conversations with the leading names in the subjects of UFOs, abductees, the paranormal, panel discussions, and the very best and brightest of the next generation of writers and researchers. Meanwhile Here on Earth, the show breaking new ground in alternative talk with your intrepid host, veteran investigative writer and researcher, Peter Robbins.
And welcome back, or welcome to Meanwhile Here on Earth with me, your host, Peter Robbins. Every week we cover a new subject within the same area, usually, of UFOs, the paranormal, how people in these fields became the people that they are, connections between creativity and the paranormal. And tonight's guest is John Russell. John has been a professional psychic for 50 years. He is internationally known. He has provided psychic readings for clients in over 40 countries and still reads for a worldwide clientele. He has been a paranormal researcher and investigator since childhood and has experienced more than 1,000 paranormal manifestations. He is also a UFO experiencer. Over the decades, John has studied, investigated, and practiced an abundance of psychic paranormal disciplines, including, but investigations, mediumship, tarot readings, healings, remote healings, and runes. John filmed a TV pilot for the History Channel in which he psychically explored the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. The accuracy of his psychic insights verified by the docents at the historic sites he explored, as well as production team members. And I have to say, every once in a while, in going through a new biography, I will come upon a word that I know but forgot the meaning of. And in this case, it's docents, which is a being or a person who is a knowledgeable guide, especially one who conducts visitors, say, through a museum and delivers commentary on the exhibitions. John has also stimulated paranormal activity himself, some of which has been captured on film. For more than 18 years now, he has been a popular featured guest on radio shows and podcasts, both here and abroad, including 10 appearances to date on Coast to Coast AM with George Noory, which of course is Meanwhile Here on Earth's closest competitor, In My Dreams. John Russell is also the author of 3 multi-award-winning books, Riding with Ghosts, Angels and the Spirits of the Dead, and A Knock in the Attic. A third book, 20 Ways to Increase Your Psychic Abilities, was published last year and hit the Barnes & Noble top 100 best-selling books list. His most recent book, The Crying Tree and the Magic Rock, are due for publication later this year. And John Russell, it is a pleasure to welcome you to Meanwhile Here on Earth.
Peter, it's my pleasure to be here. I really appreciate you having me. I've been looking forward to this so much, and I know we're going to have a good time tonight, and so are the listeners.
That's great, John. We are in different parts of the East Coast experiencing different weather phenomena at the moment. I am here in the Northeast with the possibility of a fair amount of snow dumping tonight and tomorrow. You are in the
Southeast.
I was going to say the polar opposite, but that's allegorically wrong. In the allegorical
polar opposite weather-wise.
Yeah. What is the temperature in Ocala, Florida right now?
I think we're somewhere in the 70s right now.
Ah, that's too bad.
Yeah, isn't that terrible?
going through a cold streak.
It's rough. But I have
John,
to tell you, when I
yeah.
met my wife, I'm from West Texas, and my wife's a New York native. And when I met her, I moved to New York to be with her. So I lived in New York for 6.5 years up in the mountains in Cornwall.
Oh
And so
boy.
I found out what the New York winters are all about. Trust me.
So you get to appreciate your winters even a bit more as a result.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
John, I don't have a lot of psychics on the show. And in passing, in going back and forth a bit, corresponding leading up to this, I had even suggested possibly bringing another one on, one that I knew as well as I can know is authentic. And your reaction was, let's just do this between the two of us because
Right.
there are so many frauds out there, so to say.
Yes.
And I'll begin at my beginning before asking you about your beginning, which
Okay.
was I was first introduced to, I guess, the world of psychics as a concept in my teens, probably. But
Yeah.
by my early 20s, I was reading books by and about Edgar Cayce. And
Right.
I learned fairly quickly that even if there's a zillion frauds out there, this is a real deal. And there are
Yes.
real people who
Absolutely.
can do this.
Yeah.
But, that wonderfully unappealing image of some huckster rolling their eyes back in their head, talking in a funny voice, making believe they're a disembodied 5,000-year-old spirit, and
Yep.
then collecting the check. Um, it is an area that is fraught. And
Yes.
before I ask you about the beginning of your awareness of your own abilities, can you tell us a bit about, well, where were you born for starters, and tell us a bit about your childhood and your family?
Well, I was born in Carlsbad, New Mexico, and immediately whisked back to West Texas, where I grew up. And my family was my mother had a lineage of psychic people and spiritual paranormal experiences in her side of the family.
Hmm.
My father was religious and pretty much a closet believer.
Hmm.
And he would, and that was chiefly because he realized that if he were to come out and acknowledge the paranormal realm, it would bring down the wrath of the church. So he kind of kept it as a closet belief, and it also scared him to death. Now, my father was a rough man. He was a rancher. We owned a bar. He was the bar's bouncer. I remember he kept a blackjack and a hammer behind the bar, and so he was this tough guy.
Yeah.
But the paranormal appeared and disappeared at will and did what it wanted to, and he couldn't control it, and he couldn't lay his hands on it, and he couldn't fight it. So that scared him to death because he had absolutely no control over it. So that was
You bring
my
up you bring up an important point, which we'll
yeah.
get back into later again, that there are, in the world of what we'll laughingly call organized religion, although
Right.
with respect as well as humor, this phenomena is, well, we human beings are just such characters. What we don't understand, we will often reject,
Demonized. Yes.
demonize, or mechanize in our mind, or mystify, as opposed to just trying to wrap our head around it with respect.
Yeah,
And
being open and trying to investigate it and find out what's going on.
that's
Yeah.
it. And
Yeah.
we can spend our whole lives attempting that, and at the same time know that there are certain questions that there really aren't answers to.
Exactly.
As a young person, did you have siblings?
I had a half sister, and she was out of the house and married, so she wasn't around.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you grew up in fairly rural surroundings, or you had access?
No, we had moved into the city from the farm. They had sold the farm, and we had moved into the city. And I was 5.5, somewhere around in there. And I was lying in bed, sound asleep. My parents had left a nightlight on down the hall so I could see if I had to get up, go to the bathroom tonight, whatever. So I was absolutely sound asleep, and all of a sudden, totally, completely wide awake for no apparent reason. No drowsiness, no grogginess. And I thought, well, maybe there's a noise outside. And I laid there and I listened, didn't hear anything. Everything was quiet. And I thought, well, this is really strange. This is really odd. And I raised up on my elbows in bed just to kind of look around my room. And I looked out my bedroom's open door down the hallway. And in the nightlight's glow, I could see, peering around one of the hallway doors that went off into the dining room, I could see this elderly black gentleman peering around the doorframe at me. And my family was white. We didn't have anyone black living with us. I don't even think we had black friends at the time. And I screamed bloody murder because as a 5.5-year-old kid, my assumption is somebody's broken into the house. So when I screamed the first scream, he walked around the doorway into the hall, started walking toward my bedroom, started walking toward me with his eyes locked on mine, never looked away. Now, I knew he was elderly because he had close cropped white hair and he had a white mustache. So I knew he was elderly. And he was every bit as solid as you or I, Peter. He wasn't translucent, wasn't transparent. He was totally, completely solid. I can tell you the clothes he wore. He had on this red plaid flannel long sleeve shirt. He had on khaki pants, black shoes, black belt. And the closer he got, I screamed bloody murder again. That woke my parents up, and here they started to come running. And when they started to come running, he stopped close to the foot of my bed and began to disappear. And then he vanished. And so my parents came in and they were trying to console me. And they said, oh, you just had a nightmare. You had a bad dream. You watched something on TV and it scared you. And I said, no, there's somebody in this house. Even though I'd just seen him disappear, I said, there is someone in this house. And I was so convincing that my father literally went through the house, checked all the doors and windows, literally looked under the beds, opened up the closets and looked in them. And of course, there was no one there in the flesh. And then it dawned on me, I'd seen my first ghost. And
John,
yeah,
up until this moment, you're 5.5. That's still
right.
very much in the world of kids.
Mm-hmm.
Had this aspect of your parents' reality kind of come through to you at all, or you were still pretty, not aware of this other world, this other phenomena, the other side of the curtain, so to say? Was this your actual introduction to it, or
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah, this was my introduction to it. I'd been insulated from it up to that point.
I was going to ask you, as you began to speak about it, whether there was a translucence that you might be able to see through, as some people have described apparitions in human form. But this was like a guy, as you've described him.
Like looking at you or looking at you, totally, completely solid.
And he literally disappeared that way, though, just like the Cheshire Cat, so to say.
Yeah, exactly. And so it dawned on me I'd seen my first ghost, and trying to get back to sleep was just about impossible because it was like, is he going to come back? Why did he come in the first place? Is he going to want to talk to me? Is he going to ask me to do something scary? What in the world? So they left the big light on for me and stayed with me till I got back to sleep. And I spent the next several weeks looking over my shoulder a lot and having a difficult time getting to sleep. And then being that young, I didn't have the vocabulary or the thought process to articulate it. But intuitively, all of a sudden, I understood why he had come. I started to experience these paranormal manifestations on the physical realm. My parents saw them, other people saw them and experienced them. And all of a sudden it dawned on me, okay, that guy came, the old black ghost came to open up the portal of these experiences to me. Now, why? And the more I dwelt on it, again, I couldn't articulate it, but intuitively I understood, okay, these experiences are going to be super valuable to me someday for some reason. And they're also going to be valuable and helpful to other people for whatever reason. So
John,
I have to go with the flow here,
As is often the case, if somebody experiences a UFO-related event, a sighting, a contact experience, abduction, even though it's so counterintuitive, makes no sense other than the fact that that ridicule factor has informed so much of people's behavior around the subject for so long.
Yeah.
although it's dissipating now. But that your normal inclination, if in an otherwise sane world, which
Hmm.
doesn't exist, would be to inquire, to talk
Right.
about it, to ask questions, as opposed to kind of just blithely go on with your life,
Exactly.
or seemingly so. Was this something that you followed up even with a question with either of you folks over the weeks that followed?
Well, it was kind of a okay, I'm experiencing this, now what? And I didn't really talk with my parents about it that much until it was a little while later. It was before I turned 6. And the continuation of these experiences was that I was out in the backyard. I was playing with a toy, and this car pulled into the driveway, and I didn't know the people. I didn't recognize the people. So I ran inside and I got my folks and I said, this is some cars pulling the driveway. I don't know who it is. And they said, okay, we'll come out and see. So they came out and they said, oh, these are friends of ours. And I had never met the people. I didn't know them. So they got out of their car and they were standing there on the sidewalk talking with my mom and dad before they went in the house. And I was playing with my toy. And I walked up to the group of people and I looked up at them while they were conversing. And I remember I just had this feeling come over me, and there was a pause in the conversation. And I looked up at them and I said, you folks have just been on vacation. And I said, you drove that car that's in the driveway. And I said, you have 2 children. They're not with you today, but you have 2 kids and you took the kids with you on that vacation. And you
You're
stayed at
6 years old?
yeah. And I said, you stayed at this hotel that had this many floors and it was painted this color and there were these trees shaped like this.
Whoa.
Yeah, at regular intervals in the front, and the back was the pool area and it was painted this color. Well, the guy was looking at his wife and looking at my parents with a kind of weird grin on his face, like, what is going on? And I will never forget his wife. She was looking at me like I had cobras coming out of my ears. She was literally bug-eyed and slack-jawed, and she looked at my parents and she said, how the hell could he know this? And my mother was like, no, kids and their imaginations. And she goes, no, no, no. Kids and their imaginations doesn't cut it. How the hell could he know this? And my parents were just taken aback and didn't know what to say. And she said, that's what we came to tell you today, is about the vacation we just took. And we drove our car. We took our 2 kids. The hotel we stayed at is exactly as John described. How the hell is it possible that he can know this? And my parents were like, go play, John. And I was like, okay, nice to meet you folks. And off I went. And it scared them so bad they never came to visit my parents again.
You're still in elementary school, of course.
Yeah.
At this point, do you have like a close friend, a best friend, a buddy, somebody that you can maybe even talk to about this stuff? Or is this kind of conditioning you in a way to know that this is something that's yours, that maybe is better at this point in your young life to not be talking at and bringing other people into what?
Yeah.
How were you handling it at that young point in your
Well,
life?
that's a good point, Peter, because it was very ostracizing. And if I tried to talk to somebody about it, it was like, you're making stuff up, you're daydreaming, you're dreaming, you're hallucinating, you're of the devil, we don't do that, that kind
Yeah.
of thing. So I learned very quickly that I had to internalize it and I had to be very careful who I spoke with about these things. And there was a lot of fear from people. There was a lot of disbelief. There was a lot of just don't want to talk about it. Just don't want anything to do with it. So that was kind of the minefield, the maze, if you will, that I had to find my way through growing up.
At this point, John, did you turn to your mom or dad and push a bit, not knowing, of course, that
Mhm.
they both had, I think it's just a wonderful, I don't know what's an authentic term or it was invented by Stanley Kubrick in The Shining, but that idea of that you shine,
Yeah,
he
yeah,
refers to his I thought it was
right,
just a
right.
wonderful evocative term that may well have been colloquial, maybe in the South or something. But did you look to them? Did you actually try to reach out at that point and get some answers that you thought maybe one of them might have, or just still turning this over in your mind on your own and leaving them out of it greatly?
Well, I was able to talk with my mother some, and of course, she gave me the best answers that she could. But she ran up against a brick wall after a while. It's like, I don't know. And of course, my father, he would see these paranormal manifestations with his own eyes, and then don't want anything to do with it, don't want to talk about it. So what I began to do, my mother had raised me to be a very, very good reader with very good reading comprehension.
Great.
And so at a very young age, I was reading adult books. So I began to turn to every book I could find written by anybody and everybody on religion, psychology, parapsychology, the paranormal, the psychic realm. And I studied and I read and I studied and I read and I experimented. And it was like, okay, let's see how good I can make this thing. Let's see what works and what doesn't. And if it works, I'm going to use it. I'm going to see if I can expand it. I'm going to see what I can do with it. If it doesn't work, I'm going to get rid of it.
So a double question here. The first part is, you said essentially your mom did her best to, explain.
Right.
What did she actually tell you, to the best of your memory?
The most helpful thing, the greatest thing that she told me, and this is something I've lived by, and in my experience and in all my paranormal investigations and my experiences with the psychic manifestations, paranormal manifestations I've had, the greatest thing she told me was, this is not going to hurt you. This is not going to harm you. You may not understand it, and it may have scared you, and there may still be things that startled you, but it's not going to hurt you. And, use this gift to connect with the other side and connect with these spirits that are trying to guide you and trying to direct you, and see where they're taking you and see where they want you to go with this and how they want you to develop this. So that was the best advice I ever got.
It's wonderful how sometimes an adult facing the child they love more than they love themselves and would do anything for, when asked an impossible question, will come up with the right answer. It can be that simple. But exactly. I'm now thinking, you're still in elementary school.
Yes.
And you have reading skills and a drive that we understand now, a natural curiosity to find out what makes you different.
What is going on? Yeah.
To kind of,
Yeah, I'm in elementary school and I'm reading William James and Carl Jung and the Christian apologist and the spiritual apologist and all of this. And
were any of your teachers aware that you were on your own going beyond Dick and Jane and the Weekly Reader?
My English teachers especially, because I started writing at an early age and they encouraged me. And they said, you have such a marvelous grasp of the language and the usage and comprehension. And why don't you use this? Why don't you become a writer? And, people think, well, if you have this great psychic gift and the spiritual understanding, your life is smooth and good and so on and so forth. No, I'm still a kid growing up. I've still got hormones. I've still got problems. I'm still trying to fit in. I'm still living the normal life that everybody else does. And the psychic gift doesn't address that. It's this baggage, this backpack that I'm carrying along with me as I'm trying to figure out who John Russell the person is and where John Russell the person fits in. And then carrying the baggage of this psychic gift to boot, that you never know what kind of reaction you're going to get when you talk to people about this. So it was very frustrating growing up sometimes. And it was, again, very isolating.
John, you're now coming into adolescence.
Right.
You have to be preoccupied with this subject. I think anybody who's watching or listening, whatever their feelings about psychic phenomena, my viewers and listeners tend to have fairly open minds. And was there a part of you that's struggling to see yourself as what we'll laughingly call normal in the future, to have like a straight life and, do a certain career kind of thing and either go to an office, or you're not thinking about being an artist yet? Or, I mean, for a lot of kids, it would be, I want to be
Right.
boys. It might be, I want to be, fireman, a cowboy, a soldier,
Yeah.
whatever. Or were you kind of so preoccupied with this that really wasn't breaking through to the way it might for the next kid over?
Kind of both. The other side, the paranormal, once it started, it never left me and it never turned off.
Hmm.
So growing up for me, that was normal. That's the only thing I ever knew.
Yeah.
At the same time, like you said, I had to try and figure out, okay, apart from this gift and apart from this realm, I have to grow up and do something and fit somewhere. What is that? And how do I do that?
Hmm.
And for me, that was the nightmare. That was the difficult part,
Yeah.
and trying to search out and figure out who I was, where I fit in, what I should do. And I always told people, I said, there were times that I worked full-time jobs at something, put food on the table or whatever. And at the same time, I was working full-time as a psychic.
Yeah.
I would get through with the job, come home, eat dinner, and start doing readings for people and talk to people on the phone and talk to people in person and go do paranormal investigations and all these things. And back when I was younger and had the energy, I could do that. I could do 2 full-time jobs in essence. So that was part of my life. And it was always trying to, oddly enough, the paranormal realm, my psychic gift, was where I was comfortable. It was trying to fit the other thing into my life that was the discomforting part of it for me.
Sure.
Yeah.
You in reading the introduction that you sent me and that I reworked a bit,
Mhm.
you talk about exploring these different disciplines, areas of study,
Yeah.
and I'm wondering at a certain point, probably through regular public school, that you're introduced to the world of science per se,
Yeah.
and you have science class, and you're starting to see that part of the world where it can be just as exciting and mysterious in its own way, but
Yes.
there are rules, there
Right.
are laws
Right.
that govern things that otherwise seem just.
Chaotic. Yeah.
Did you? I guess what I'm asking here is, and maybe you still don't know the answer to this question, but was there a point where you started to think about maybe this phenomenon that I'm affected by, that my friends don't seem to be, is that there are laws to it. It's just that I don't understand them. My water boils at 212 degrees Fahrenheit.
Right. Right.
Maybe there's a law in the greater realm of understanding that we'll call the law of transmigration of souls. It's
Right.
just as real as water boiling at a certain degree, but it governs that essence
Yeah.
of us that most people refer to as a soul
Yeah.
that inhabits the body while alive and animated, but
Right.
it moves on and is, or that it's mystical and hocus pocusy and that we
Yeah.
can't ever wrap our heads around it. How did you start to think about reconciling that? And looking back now, can you give us some insight into, and this is a core question, what you feel is at play here for
Yeah.
authentic psychics?
Yeah. That's one of the best questions I've ever been asked, Peter. It really is. And I think that we have to recognize some things about science. Science is as much a shot in the dark as the spiritual realm is. And Stanton Friedman wrote a book called Science Got It Wrong.
Yep.
You know,
Science is
um,
wrong.
so yeah, science was wrong. So we have to understand that in the realm of science, where we seem so sure-footed and so, certain in our knowledge, just the other day, I read a news article that stated that they assumed that Neanderthal man was way back there away from Homo sapiens. And now they're saying that it appears that Homo sapiens and Neanderthal man existed side by side.
That's right.
So we're constantly learning, we're constantly having to revise in the realm of science, so on and so forth. And likewise in the realm of the paranormal. Now, what's really hurt us in the psychic realm and in the realm of the paranormal is we have phonies and frauds and fakes in abundance. We have superstitions in abundance. We have people that were taught this thing by so and so, and therefore that's the way it is. And in reality, it doesn't work that way. So what's hampered us in the spiritual realm is the fact that just like how many times did Edison try before he got the light bulb invented?
600 or 800, right in there.
Yeah.
To get that filament.
And that's in the realm of science. Okay. That's those hard facts that we're talking about. And there was all this experimentation before it finally came about.
Yeah.
So how much more so in the spiritual realm, where you start by dealing with invisible beings and invisible energies and invisible powers and invisible realms. And then you have to figure out, okay, how do I connect with that? And how do I communicate with that? One of the analogies that I always give, and people that, and you being in radio, and a lot of people that have owned radio stations that have interviewed me and things like that, they love this analogy, because I tell them, I say, here's my analogy and our attempted communication with the spiritual realm. When I was a kid, when I was a teenager, we had this friend, he had a ham radio, shortwave radio. We could sit in West Texas, and on a good night when the conditions were right, we would talk to Australia and England. Oh my God. And maybe 15, 20 minutes, and it was like they were there in the room with us.
Yeah.
The next night, we did good to talk to somebody across town, right? And I think it's the same way in the spiritual realm, the psychic realm. We have these occasions where whatever those conditions are just right. And we make those communications, and we get the EVP, or we get the REM pod, or we get the psychic message or the communication or whatever. And we might go back to the same spot the next night to investigate again, and nothing, or very, very little. And I think it's because we don't have a good understanding of what the conditions are that make that a good communication. And look, in every spiritual process, that's what we try and do. If you go to a Christian church, you sing hymns, you pray, you may have candlelight, you may have incense, you've got music. What are you trying to do? You're trying to raise that atmosphere and get everybody focused on the spiritual realm and make that connection with God, so that God will come down and bless you. If you believe in voodoo, what do? You light a fire, you chant, you sing, you get the energy going, you get the energy pumped up, you create that environment to connect with the other side. If you hold a seance or hold a circle, what do? You hold hands, you pray, you sing, you try and raise that vibration. You're trying to create that construct that's specific to communicating with the other side. So regardless of what mechanism you use spiritually, whether it's traditional religion or whatever, we're all utilizing the same construct to try and make that connection with the other side, make that communication with the other side. And even paranormal investigators, what do? They go in, okay, I'm setting up, my mindset's there. I got my camera, I got my EVP recorder, I got my REM pod. We're ready. We're setting the stage. You know, we're singing our hymns, we're saying our prayers. Spirit, come through, talk to us, communicate with us. So I think that's a lot of it, and it's a very imperfect science, just like science is very imperfect. And we're still learning. We're still growing. And I think the thing that hampers us is we have as much dogmatism in the psychic realm, the paranormal realm, as we do in religion, science, or anything else.
Yeah. John, I'm trying to think how to say this. In the face of reality,
Whoop, you froze.
face the unknown, often armed with sets of belief, or we're very sure that we don't believe in. For the starting point is, it doesn't have to do with being a skeptic. we all need to keep our skeptical facilities sharp and in gear,
Absolutely.
especially people like you
Absolutely.
and I. Um,
Yes.
it's, to be caught by somebody, yanking your chain is
Yes.
is professionally, can be very destructive. But
Absolutely.
often the understanding doesn't have to do with being a skeptic. It has to do with being a debunker, and that's a very different thing. Debunkers, of course,
Completely
know
different thing. Yeah.
that you're at best a well-meaning crank
Right.
or a totally mystified, lost soul that's doing their best to try to codify your
Yeah.
semi-mentally ill experiences and put them
Exactly.
in some
Exactly.
order. But they know,
The amazing Randy.
yeah, exactly. They
Let me
know
Can I
that
tell
your
you an interesting
claims,
story before I forget about Randy?
please,
There was I saw, and I can't find the darn thing, and I have it somewhere on a VHS
and
tape.
let's tell our viewers and listeners, the amazing Randy
Yeah,
was,
a
he,
professional stage magician,
yeah,
and
yeah,
became a debunker.
yes,
He wasn't a skeptic; he was a debunker. In his mind,
it's all tricks.
everything there's nothing to anything. Everybody's a fraud. Everything's a fake. Everything's a phony.
Yep.
So
Continue on.
yeah, so this VHS tape that I have this on, this shows you how far back this goes, that it was on VHS. And I can't remember the name of it. People have suggested the title. I've looked up some things and I can't find it. But it was a special that Randy did or that featured Randy. It was an hour long. It was on TV and I recorded it. And, Randy's thing, he had the $1 million prize. If you could prove to him, to his satisfaction, that your psychic or paranormal powers were real, he would give you $1 million. That $1 million was the safest thing on this entire planet. I was watching this show that he did, and there was a guy that said he could. I don't remember all the exact details, but I'm going to get it right. I mean, the whole overview of the thing is right. I don't remember if the guy was just a psychic or if he said he did psychometry or what the deal was, but I believe that he may have done psychometry. And Randy had an object that a friend had given to him, and he said, "Okay, if this guy gets anything from this at all, um, I'll be amazed because very few people know of this person and that this friend gave it to me, and it may have come from a foreign country or whatever. I don't remember, but anyways, it was a very significant thing." So the guy begins to tell Randy about this object and describes the friend that gave it to him. And Randy, by his own admission in this show, says, quote unquote, the guy's batting 1,000. Okay. Randy's admitting the guy is correct. So this goes on. And then the guy says, there's something about your friend, something unusual about his neck. And he said, it reminds me of a clerical collar. He's not a priest, but it's like there's something around his neck. And
Hmm.
it's like almost reminds me of a Nehru jacket. And so Randy said, wrong. He said, my friend's not a priest. He doesn't wear a collar. He doesn't wear Nehru jackets. Wrong. So come to find out, his friend had a proclivity for turtleneck sweaters. So he did always have something around his neck. There was, in essence, a collar around his neck because he wore turtleneck sweaters a lot. And Randy declared, if one thing is wrong, it's all wrong. So I was on a radio station frequently in New York, and I'd become friends with the DJ, and he called me one day, and I said, "Oh, hey, how you doing?" We were talking. I was like, all of a sudden, I was panic stricken. I was like, "Oh my God, are we supposed to be on the air today?" He goes, "No, no, no." He said, "I just called you." He said, "You got a minute?" And I said, "Yeah." He said, "Guess who I'm going to have on as a guest?" I said, "Oh, Jesus, I don't know." And he goes, "Randy." I said, "Oh my God, you're kidding me. You've got the amazing Randy on for a guest." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "Can you tune in and, help me blow this guy's doors off?" And I was like, let me look at my schedule. I looked at my schedule, like, oh my God, I was crestfallen. I said, there's no way I can get out of my schedule and be on the air with you and Randy. There's no possible way. I said, this just breaks my heart, but I can't do it. And he said, okay, give me some questions to ask Randy. I said, okay. Said first, and I recounted that incident to him with the guy and the so on and so forth. And I said, ask Randy about that. Okay. And the second question is, this is what I've asked everyone, including the most staunch disbelievers. And I said, if you're totally, completely honest in your heart of hearts, haven't you had at least one experience in your life that you can't explain by any normal rational means? So I said, ask him those two questions. And he said, okay. So he called me back after he'd interviewed Randy, and he said, I went into depth, went at length with Randy about the psychic that he said was batting 1,000 up until that point that he disagreed with, and the guy wasn't wrong. It was just that Randy chose to interpret it that way. And I asked Randy about that, and that's what he said. He said, we set these things up beforehand. I'm the final arbiter, and if one thing's wrong, everything's wrong. And so he said, you mean if the guy gets 9 things right and one thing's wrong, the whole thing's wrong? And Randy said, that's correct. We tossed
Pretty rigid.
Pretty rigid. And so he asked Randy the next question, if you're being totally honest in your heart of hearts, haven't you ever had at least one experience in your life that you can't explain by normal means? And he said, Randy's response was, no, next question. So there are people that have their minds made up, and if a flying saucer lands in the backyard and an alien gets out, they're going to be able to explain it away, rationalize it away, and they're not going to accept it. And that's really sad. Now, I agree with you 100%. We have to have a healthy skepticism. But when we go into something with our mind made up, either way, that it absolutely is or it absolutely isn't, we do ourselves a disservice, and we do the people that we're trying to serve a disservice. We have to go in with an open mind and say, okay, possibility.
You cite another very memorable quotation from the late, great Stanton Friedman, which is, don't bother me with the facts. My mind is made up. Before we get into your interest and involvement in the subject of UFOs up close and personal, many years ago, when I was really beginning to develop a name for myself as an investigative writer specializing in the subject of UFOs, I would sometimes get people reacting like, oh, you're into UFOs. How interesting. Are you also into like ghosts and reincarnations and, ancient mysteries? And, I would think to myself, to a degree I am, but I see what you're doing here, and trying to reduce me to some kind of cultural stereotype of, your mind is so open that your brain has fallen out, and anything that's weird is just you're going to embrace. To be a professional psychic and to have had UFO related experiences, certainly in the past, or for I'm sure many people still today, that's a line that you're just making yourself seem more and more untenable. I'm having trouble with the basic, thought of psychic phenomena, and you're telling me you've been taken by. So, I mean, life is the way it is. And my question for you is, growing up, do you remember, just either in the background, whether it was from something anybody said or a news report or listening to radio or, science fiction movies or reading a book, where when you first were introduced to that idea of an unidentified flying object suggesting not ours, so to say?
That was, I remember reading about UFOs in comic books when I was a kid. And for me, it was simply, oh, okay, that's a neat idea. And I didn't really embrace it as extraterrestrials or other civilizations or intelligences elsewhere. And I didn't really cotton on to the idea of it as extraterrestrial craft or anything like that. And what's really funny, as I grew up and as I developed, and like I say, these paranormal experiences I've had, and I've had way, way, way over 1,000 of them on the physical realm. And other people have witnessed these. We've recorded them. We've videotaped them. We've shot film of them, cameras, audioed them. And many, many people have witnessed these. Like when I shot the TV pilot for the History Channel, we captured paranormal phenomena on film, and other people experienced, paranormal phenomena. So these things begin to occur in my life at a rapid level. It was almost an everyday occurrence. And I was familiar by the time I was in my teenage years. I was familiar with UFOs and with the articles and with the magazines and with the interviews on TV and the books. And I did not believe a word of it. I had absolutely no belief in it, in spite of all my psychic experiences and my paranormal experiences. I did not believe in UFOs until I saw
I felt right up until I learned otherwise. And obviously, I've been setting you up for that question. At a certain point, you had a sighting or an experience. What was it that made this real for you? And about when did it happen? What were the circumstances?
Yeah, we're getting so close to the top of the hour here. I don't know if I've got time to go into that now.
We have 10 minutes.
Okay, well,
give or take.
I'll get as much in as I can, and if we have to, we'll continue after the break. But
sounds good.
One of the components that made this so compelling was, I guess by this time I was 20, 21, 22, somewhere around in there. And I had, growing up in West Texas, you have this violent weather. And I was used to that, thunderstorms, tornadoes, hail the size of softballs sometimes, all this kind of thing. So I had been to this place, parked my car in the parking lot across the street. And it was a very narrow 2-lane street. And the building I was in, as soon as I stepped out the back door of that building, I could look across the street in the parking lot and see my car. So it wasn't very far away. So I stepped out this is about 4 p.m, I guess. And I stepped out the door of the building. The first thing that hit me in the face was this blast of wind. I looked up and it was overcast, dark clouds. And I thought, oh boy, here we go. So I better run for my car before it hits. So I closed the door and I looked across the street at my car and started to head that direction. And attached to the clouds above and coming down into the parking lot in a column, there was a columnar cloud that came down into the parking lot and was resting on the asphalt by my car. And this thing was, I guess, 4, 5, 6 feet in diameter. And it was slowly rotating, slowly churning and rolling. And I had seen dust devils. I'd seen tornadoes. I'd never seen anything like this. And I stood there and I watched it for a little bit, Peter. And from within, there were these glowing globules, these orbs that would extrude outward and then recede back into it. And they were phosphorescent, orange and yellow and red and blue and green and purple. And I'm looking at this and I'm like, okay, at the tender age of 20, I've gone insane. I've lost my mind. I'm having a hallucination. When this clears up, I'm going to go to the hospital. I'm going to check myself in. I'm going to say, folks, I'm seeing things that can't be. And I'm sitting there watching this thing, and these globules are coming in and out, and going in and out. And at the bottom of the cloud in the parking lot, there was debris, like crushed paper cups and straws and bits of paper and this, that, and the other. And as this thing is rotating, rolling around, and all these orbs are going in and out, extruding from it, you would expect that paper to be disturbed, and all the paper around it was perfectly still, wasn't moving. So that convinced me I've lost the plot. I've gone nuts. So I'm standing there looking at this thing, and I get this odd urge, and it says, walk towards the cloud. So I thought, well, this is even crazier, but what the hell? I've lost my mind. Let's go. So I took a few steps toward the parking lot, and the cloud moved in the parking lot towards me. And I stopped, and it stopped, and I backed up, and it backed up. So I stood there and looked at it, and I moved forward again. It moved toward me, and I stopped. It stopped. I backed up. It backed up. And I'm
about what time of day is this, John? I just want to have an idea of the light.
Yeah, it's about 4 p.m, so it's still light out. It's still good enough to see, even though it's overcast.
You remember any other people around?
Nobody else around, except I was standing by the door of the building, and the door opens and whacks me in the back, nearly knocks me down. This buddy of mine comes out and he goes, "Oh man, I'm sorry." He said, "What are you doing standing close by the door?" And without waiting for me to answer, he looks up and he goes, "Oh boy, it looks like we're in for it, huh?" And then he looks over in the parking lot and he goes, "What in the world is that?" And my reaction is, "Thank God I'm not nuts. He sees it too. I haven't snapped." So I said, "Yeah, but watch this." And I walk toward the cloud and it moves toward me. I stop and back up and it stops and backs up. I do that a few more times. And I said, "You see that?" And he looks at me like, "I'm out of here." He's gone. He said, "Bye." And he leaves. So I said, "Okay, what do I do now?" So all of a sudden, this thing goes back up into the clouds, and all the clouds begin to move over very quickly. So I make a run for my car, I get in my car, and I'm like, "What in God's name was that?" Now, this town I know like the back of my hand, literally the entire town. And to this day, you can't get me lost in it. So I know every block, every street, every neighborhood. And I pull out and I begin to drive, and it starts to rain. Now, in West Texas, in 20 minutes, it could rain hard enough to flood your yard or flood underpasses or whatever. So I'm used to hard rain. This rain comes down, and I've got my lights on, my wipers on high. They're not doing a bit of good. Imagine your visibility being 1 foot past the hood of your car. That was it. And I'm driving down the street, and there's cars that are angle parked on the side of the street. I can't see them out the passenger window. That's how hard the rain's coming down. I've never experienced anything like that in my life. And I'm starting to panic because I cannot see. And I realize I'm going to run into somebody. I'm going to hit somebody, hit something. Somebody's going to hit me. And I had been counting the streets. I knew where I was at. We had a Sears store there. That the front of it faced Beauregard, the rear of it faced Toohey, great big parking lot back there, and there was an automotive center. So my plan, if I could do it, was to creep along till I got to Toohey Street, go up, try and get in the parking lot of Sears. I'd jump out. I knew I'd get sopping wet, didn't care. I'd run in, go downstairs, look at the sporting goods. I had one of the best sporting goods in the town. And I would enjoy that till the storm passed. And when it was safe to drive, I'd drive again. So this is my plan. So I'm poking along and, maybe 5 miles an hour, if that. And I nearly hit somebody in front of me that was stopped for a light. You could see the traffic light looked like a little tiny pinprick of light about this big in the rain. That's all you could see. And I nearly hit this car that was stopped for it. And the car behind me nearly hit me. And I was like, "What in God's name are we going to do? I'm not even going to be able to make it into Sears. I can't see the people in front of me. The people behind me can't see me. I still can't see the cars that are angle parked. I've literally got about a foot of visibility beyond my hood." So the light changes. We're poking along. I would turn onto Toohey Street, and I said, "Okay, if I can just make the parking lot without hitting anybody." And we're poking along, and I was leaned over. I had a bench seat in the car, and I'm leaned over holding on to the steering wheel. And I leaned over and I'm trying to look out the passenger window so I'm not going to scrape into these cars that are angle parked over there. Now, the rain is coming down this hard. Imagine the visibility out your side windows, 0. Imagine that. Now, it's clear. Rain's gone. It doesn't stop, doesn't slow down, doesn't taper off. It just 1 second, it's coming down that hard. You have 0 visibility. Literally the next second, it's vanished. There's none. All the visibility is returned. There's no mist hitting the windshield. I reach up, turn the wipers off. I'm like,
You're
"What?"
sure in this moment this is not some impression that you're having, your mind was drifting or anything? It just stopped, as it
It
never
stopped.
does.
It's gone.
Okay,
It was
keep
gone.
going.
Vanished. So I'm like, "What in God's name?" And about this time, the people that are driving the opposite way and on the same street are starting to swerve over into our lane and almost hit the cars that are going the opposite direction. And people are yelling and honking. People are rolling down their windows and pointing, and people are jumping out of their cars onto the street and pointing up. And I'm like, "My God, everybody's gone insane. What's happening?" And I looked at where they were pointing, and I had pulled up far enough that I could see into the Sears parking lot, see the rear of the Sears building. And over the rear of the Sears building, about 30 feet over the top of the building, maybe 30 feet away from the top of the building, was a silver metallic disc about 30 to 50 feet in diameter, hovering there over the building. No flame, no lights, no smoke, no sound, just hovering there. And that's what everybody was pointing at.
And that is the perfect place where we're going to take our break. We will be back in 4 minutes. My special guest is John Russell. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. See you in 4.
Are we alone in the universe? The most important question facing humanity is on the verge of being settled once and for all. The Mutual UFO Network has been at the forefront of this journey for nearly 50 years. Our members worldwide are dedicated to the research, documentation, and awareness that will shape the future of humanity. Won't you join us?
And we are back. Peter Robbins here. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. And my guest from sunny Florida, although it's dark out right now, is John Russell. John, welcome back to the studio.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
So we stopped at the perfect pregnant pause.
Yes.
There's the UFO in the parking lot.
So there's the UFO over the rear of the Sears building hovering there. And that's what everybody was pointing at. And at that moment, I literally did a cartoon eye rub. I didn't believe my own eyes. And there it still was. So I wanted to get out and get a closer look outside of the car. And as I reached for the door handle to open the car door, this low cloud, came from behind the UFO, covered it up. And the second that the UFO was covered up, the rain was back in full force again, instantly. So I managed, there was this guy in front of me, and he started pulling into the Sears parking lot. And I said, okay, I don't care if I hit this guy. Insurance will cover it. I'm going to talk to this guy. I got to make sure he saw this thing too. Even though I'd seen all these other people jumping out and pointing up and everything else, I'm still wrestling with this thing. I'm shell shocked.
Yeah.
And so he pulls in, I pull in, park as close as I can to him. He jumps out, I jump out, and the rain is coming down so hard it hurts. And I'm young and fleet of foot, so I'm running, shielding my eyes, running through the rain. And we get in there, and the Sears had a vestibule, kind of an airlock, where there was a place you wiped your feet, and then you went through another set of doors into the store, and the basement was downstairs to the left. So he was just standing in there in the airlock with his head down. And both of us were dripping water like we'd just come out of the shower. And I remember he wore glasses. I didn't at the time, and his glasses were all beaded with water. And I walked around in front of him and stood there for a little bit. And he was just standing there with his head hanging down. He didn't even realize I was there for a second. And he looked up and he saw me and kind of like, and I said, "Excuse me, but did you see what I just saw?" And he said, "Yeah, but I damn sure ain't going to tell nobody." And he sidestepped me and went off through the store.
Classic.
And you have to remember, this is back in, late 60s, early 70s. And you lose your job, or people think you're nuts, or people think you're crazy, or whatever. You just don't talk about this kind of thing in West Texas. And so
you've described a very archetypical reaction, and
exactly.
Almost uncontrollable desire in the moment to have your experience validated, even at the risk of a situation being created, or awkwardness, or somebody getting in your face about your.
And so at that stage of the game, I had to switch religions, because there it was. I saw it with my own eyes in the presence of witnesses. Now, what I did not do was jump on the bandwagon, because all it did was give me more questions and no answers. Whose was it? Where did it come from? Why was it there? How was that technology possible? What did it want? Why did it reveal itself to us? What was the weird cloud manifestation? Was that connected with it? It seemed to be. Why? And so I didn't have answers to those questions. And as you know, research in the UFO field and in psychology, parapsychology, the psychic realm is polluted with enough nonsense as it is. And I was not going to add to that. So my answer was, yes, they're real. Yes, there it is. I don't know where it comes from. Don't know who's piloting it. Don't know what it wants. And I've had several more UFO experiences. And to this day, I don't know who's piloting them, what they want, what's going on. But and I had one that interacted with me.
At the rate that our first hour flew by, I know I'm going to have to try to manage our time, because it's just going to go that quickly. And I'm so many points of curiosity, and the fact that I feel like we've known each other for a long time. It's very enjoyable and comfortable speaking with you. But let's go right to this job that you had working on a special project for the History Channel. A very intriguing challenge of trying to gain more information about one of the greatest tragedies in American history that certainly changed the history of this country, the murder, the assassination of President Abraham Lincoln. Very quickly, what's the backstory on it? Where was it? Did the research take place? Your presence in Ford's Theater, or what happened, and where did it leave off? What did you guys?
We had. I got an email out of the blue one day from Atlas Media in New York City, and that's when I was living up in New York with my wife. And
good.
This they wanted. They were doing this a series called Psychic History. And they were auditioning psychics for it. So they wanted me, Atlas Media wanted me to submit an audition tape. And I did, and they liked it. And from there, they scheduled a screen test. So they sent out a camera crew, and we went to a location, and I gave them psychic input there, and they were able, through their resources, to investigate and research what I had claimed that I picked up, and they were able to validate nearly everything that I said.
John, can you be more specific as to the location?
We were in, I don't remember the exact location. We were in Newburgh, I believe, and some historic place there. And they were able to validate everything that I picked up on. And so we sent that then as the screen test to Atlas Media and the History Channel. They liked it. And so the History Channel signed me to a 5-year contract. And the show was going to be psychic history. And the first episode was on the trail of the assassin, which was the, following the trail that Booth had left when he shot Lincoln at the theater.
Sure.
And my psychic impressions of everything there. So that was how that came about. And when we went to shoot the pilot, we went, to DC, of course, obviously, and then through Maryland. And I got to go to Ford's Theater, to the Mud House, to the Peterson House across the street from Ford's Theater, where they took Lincoln when he was shot, where he died.
Yeah.
And the thing that made this really great, I am the poorest student of history on the entire planet. I don't like it. I despise it. I'm not interested in it. I was the guy in school that literally wrote dates and things and stuff and pen on his hand to try and pass the history test. My entire knowledge of the Lincoln assassination was Booth shot Lincoln at Ford's Theater. That was my sum total knowledge. So they said, this is the perfect guy, because if he gets anything at all that we can validate, it has to be coming from the psychic realm, not from his personal knowledge.
I was going to say, this is probably one of the best authenticated micro areas of research into an American moment in terms of the tremendous scholarship, the historians that have zoned in second by second.
We had that. We had access to all the Lincoln experts. We had access to this vast mountain.
Well, my question is,
available to us. Yeah.
What were you able to come up with that was perhaps new to the world of scholarship of the murder of Abraham Lincoln?
There were a lot of things that I got that we validated, but I think for me, one of the most interesting was they have a museum there, beneath Ford's Theater.
Yes, I visited there.
Yeah, okay. Well, the door that they say that Booth drilled the hole in, I looked at that and I said, nope. I said, Booth did not drill this hole. I said, Booth had the hole drilled by someone who worked in the theater so that they wouldn't arouse suspicion by being there. But Booth did not drill this hole. So sure enough, after we got through with the pilot and did all the research, talked to the Lincoln experts, they combed through the mountains of available his documents and everything, things that people had written. Sure enough, Booth didn't drill that hole. It was drilled by one of the workers in the theater, as I stated. And for me, that was one of the greatest coups that we did there to pick up on that and discover that. And there were a lot of things.
Was that individual that drilled the hole, was he kind of caught in the net of conspirators?
No, my feeling was, and they said that he was instructed by the owner of the theater at the time to drill the hole ostensibly so that Lincoln's bodyguard could look through and keep an eye on him.
Perfectly.
So
okay,
I don't think he had anything at all to do with the conspiracy. Now, I picked up that the conspiracy went so much deeper and so much wider than even the historians suspected. And the historians cast a pretty wide net,
My best understanding, by the way, is in our secrecy-obsessed culture. And of course, we are kind of the poster child for the national security state. And sadly, we live in an increasingly national security world. But the excuse that's given is, it used to be there are people still left alive who could be embarrassed by, and now there are people still left alive that are direct descendants of who would be, but that there are still classified secrets around the assassination of Abraham Lincoln that have
Right.
never been declassified.
Right.
I think we can make some educated guesses on why, but I'm going to
Yeah.
jump topic here.
Okay.
There are so many different areas of paranormal experience.
Yes.
Ghosts, spirits, locations that
Remote viewing.
kind of
Yeah. Everything.
resonate.
There's tons of things. Yeah.
Yeah, the ability to move physical objects without touching
Telekinesis.
them.
Yeah.
Yeah, but precognition, the idea that one can go somewhere and
Yeah.
look into the future. And my first caveat here would be to say one can make educated guesses sometimes and have them stack up like a lucky moment at a slot machine, where
Right.
defying every possible realistic odds, one in however many you want to choose, it
Mhm.
falls right. And let's say hypothetically, it is one of those 1 in 140,000 chances or 1 in 580,000 chances. However,
Right. Right.
like winning a lottery, that's
Exactly.
not mystical. It's not
Exactly.
like all the forces, and it's the odds. Somebody had to
Yeah.
win, and it's you.
Yeah.
However, I I love the idea from a literary and
Mhm.
a make-believe point of view of time travel. Who doesn't?
Yeah.
Um, uh, we know that one of the theories put forward, and who's going to prove it's wrong, for truly anomalous advanced technology UFOs is that these are machines from our future come back,
Right.
with our the
Mhm.
folks who will follow us if we don't vaporize everybody that comes after us with our
Right.
behavior now. And it just seems so untenable.
Yeah.
There are people that have this happen. You may be one of them.
Mhm.
And other people like myself that don't have these things happen, except maybe once or twice they do.
Yeah.
And when they do, and I know there are people out here that we're speaking to who immediately know what I'm talking about. I've been living a relatively standard issue life without a lot of paranormal activities and
Right.
waking up with gray aliens in the room, or defying gravity or slipping
Right.
through some
Right.
wormhole. But I'm going to describe an experience to you,
Okay.
and from a point of view as scientific as it can be,
Mhm.
or however you can help me to understand this.
Analyze it.
And
Okay.
again, understanding is kind of a booby prize in many respects.
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
it doesn't help it very often, but what I'm about to describe, I don't think I've ever talked about it in public, not that it's some
Okay.
secret, but it
Okay.
happened to me when I was probably 26 or 27.
Mhm.
I had a loft in Chinatown in East New York, Lower Manhattan. My main job at that point was for a number of years buildings in an area called Soho, south of
Yeah.
Houston
Mhm.
Street,
South of Houston. Yeah.
a warehouse district before then, very sleepy and kind of a lot of disused real estate. The largest concentration of cast iron architecture still standing in the world, quite a
Mhm.
remarkable area like that.
Yeah.
I was one of those journeyman carpenters that was working on building after building as part
Mhm.
of mostly artist teams with the contractor,
Right.
turning them into lofts
Lots
and
for the artists. Yeah.
residences and galleries. And we worked for cash primarily. We
Mhm.
were, pickup crews.
Right.
Um,
Right.
and I had finished my day's work, and I had some tools with me, but most of the stuff was at the site.
Mhm.
And I decided to stop and have a beer
Mhm.
at Ken and John's Broom Street Bar. Now
Okay.
just uh, Ken's Broom Street Bar. I think it's still there.
Mhm.
It's at Grand and West Broadway at the northeast corner.
Mhm.
And I am walking west along Grand Street.
Right.
And just, minding my own business kind of, but can see a few blocks ahead of me, and the streets aren't terribly busy. And I guess about 3 blocks away, 2.5 blocks away, I see a limousine pull away from the front of the bar. I get there a few minutes later, and there's a real buzz in the place. What had happened? Well, Mick Jagger had just left. He had stopped in for, hey, it's a 1977, 78. This is major. And everybody's abuzz. Place is pretty packed. I wave to my friend Jimmy, who's behind the bar. And I take a seat. There are cafe tables.
Right.
And 1, 2, 3 in, there's an empty one. And I sit down facing the door, which is glass, plate glass windows. Waitress comes over. I order a beer. And this is all happening in a matter of maybe 3 minutes at most.
Yeah.
But I'm feeling it now. I just start to feel anxious. I start to feel tense. There's something, it has nothing to do with what these other people are feeling. They're, in the thrall of a pop star.
Right.
Something is going on that I just don't understand. I don't like it. It's like scratching a chalkboard or a little electricity in the air.
Yeah.
And there's a guy at the bar who is inebriated, and he's getting loud.
Yeah.
And Jimmy, who can be very affable, is a tough guy who grew up in Hell's Kitchen. He could be an absolute gentleman, but he wasn't somebody you wanted to get in their face.
Right.
And I saw him kind of lean over and say to the guy, shut up or whatever.
Yeah.
And he wasn't buying it. And this is just informing my own anxiety. Within 30 seconds, the guy really starts to just act up again. And Jim walks out from behind the bar and very discreetly handles him, walks him to the door and out of the bar.
Right.
With, I guess, just even a physical admonition that you're not welcome back in here.
Yeah.
And I watch this. And then I just start to go into another place. And I have this just imagination thing that happens to me. I look at him. He's there, but now he's walked around to the side of the bar on the West Broadway side, and he's weaving a bit. He's bobbing. He's drunk.
Yeah.
But he's coming back and forth across the window. I'm not happy with what is going on in my head. There's nothing to do with reality here. He walks back to the front door, which again is plate glass. And he backs up, and I think, oh no, you're not gonna. And he runs at the door, and the plate glass breaks.
Yeah.
He comes flying through. He's got blood on him. He crashes into the guy seated at that first cafe table. That cafe table starts to go over. It hits the table, the guy sitting with his back to it at the table next to me. And as his table goes over, I simply grab my beer and stand up. My table goes over, and the bar breaks into pandemonium.
Right.
In that moment, I kind of come back to reality.
Yeah.
What? And I'm sitting where I am, and I'm looking now again at the guy who's standing still there at the door. And I watch him as he walks around to the side of the bar. And now he's doing what he just did in my imagination, move for move. And now I'm really starting to feel incredibly wired. This can't really be happening.
Yeah.
And I watch him knowing what I think is going to happen. And he walks back to the front door, and he walks back, and I watch him run at it, come through a plate glass door. And everything happens just as I say, except that it's really happening now. And as that third table comes to me and I lift my beer, the bar breaks into pandemonium. I pick up my table, put the beer back on it. I am calm as the Buddha. It's just like, oh, that's what that was about.
That's what that was about. Yeah.
And I finish my beer and I head back to Chinatown. I have never had an experience like that since. I never had one before. And it just kind of shines like a little gem of what it was. I've never felt obsessed with it.
Right.
It was what it was.
Yep.
What was it, John?
That was precognition. That was precognition. And,
How? What?
the thing of it is, we go through life, all of us go through life, and we periodically intersect with these experiences for whatever reason. And usually, I tell my clients, it's usually because the other side is trying to communicate with you the reality of that other side and the reality of these experiences and the fact that these things are real. They do exist. They can be beneficial for you. They can be helpful for you. And so that's the other side getting your attention and validating that these things are real. And I tell people, I say, okay, when these things happen, now, like for you, it happened. Wow, that was cool. That was weird. That was wild. You went on about your business. And I tell people when that happens, this is a signal from the other side that that's when you're supposed to start paying attention. That's when you're supposed to start investigating. That's when you're supposed to start connecting. That's when you're supposed to start getting closer to the other side, because they have a reason for communicating with you that way. And that's usually to open up the door to further communication, to the advancement of your intuition, to the advancement of your knowledge and connection with the other side. It's like I had a lady that when I was shooting the pilot for the History Channel, this lady came to me during a break in the filming, and she said, when you get a bigger break, I have to talk to you. And I said, okay, yeah, I'll be happy to. She said, a ghost tried to kill me. I said, oh my God. I said, no ghost tried to kill you. Yeah, this ghost tried to kill me. I said, okay, whatever. So immediately the other side downloaded all the information to me about what had happened to her. So I already knew what was going on. So we got to a break in the filming, and I said, we'll go in this other room and we'll talk. So I said, okay, I already know what the situation is, what the scenario is, but tell me what happened. She said, okay, I'm in my kitchen and I'm washing dishes, and this door on my cupboard opens all by itself. This plate flies across the room from out of the cupboard, hits the wall beside me, shatters and falls to the floor. This ghost tried to kill me. I said, no. I said, the ghost didn't try and kill you. The ghost didn't even try and hurt you. I said, the other side has shown me what's going on in your life. I said, they're trying to get your attention. And they've been trying to get your attention for a long time, and you've been ignoring them. You've been pushing them away. Nope, I'm not going to listen to this. I'm not going to see this. I'm not going to do this. And I said, the other side has some things that they need to communicate to you for your well-being, for your growth, for your protection. And you've been pushing them away and you've been ignoring them. And finally, out of frustration, they went, ignore this. You can't ignore this. And I said, now they've got your attention. I said, what you need to do. And I told her how to connect with that, how to communicate with them, and how to receive that guidance, that inspiration. And it made sense for her. But we all have these opportunities in our lives that we can deepen our spiritual experience if, when that occurs, we back up and we stop and go, whoa, wait a minute. You validate the experience you had, you appreciate it, you get from it what you need at the time, and then you take it to the next level. And you say, okay, guys, you woke me up. I'm here. I understand. Where do you want me to go next? What do you got? What are you showing me next? And we all have those experiences, but a lot of people don't follow through with them.
That's right. John, one of the subjects that I inadvertently or sometimes intentionally explore on this show is the connections between human creativity and the paranormal.
Yeah.
Not that you have a paranormal experience or like a UFO experience and you're a great artist or immediately start playing, piano concertos. I think that's part of the kind of I want to believe in the mythology. And sometimes I think it's just coincidental. Other times I think, and a good example for me has always been Mike Rogers, who was the crew chief of the truck, the loggers who were together with Travis Walton when he was taken in 1975. Mike was the one behind the wheel,
Yeah.
and also went through quite a bit of stuff as a
Exactly.
result of his
Yeah.
participation in the event. Mike, like Travis, grew up in Snowflake, Arizona, and went on to become quite an accomplished artist. In fact, he illustrated
Hmm.
uh, the first edition of Fire in the Sky. And if
Hmm. Hmm.
one didn't know otherwise, one would have thought that Travis or the publisher hired, a professional illustrator. And I
Exactly. Yeah.
remember asking him about this, and it was more a matter of I had this experience,
Mhm.
and it just kind of woke me up to was there anything that I'm not doing that I would sort of like to do or try out,
Right.
as
Right.
opposed to, a big crash of thunder and all of a sudden you
Exactly.
got the gift.
Right.
And he developed it.
Yeah.
Um, you are a painter as well
Yeah.
as a award-winning author.
Right.
And you sent me some images of your paintings, which I'd like us to take a look at right now,
Sure.
because
Sure.
I particularly like them. And
Thank you. Thank
here we go.
you. Yes.
And
That's one of my favorites. I just love that one. That one resonates with me.
yeah. I like them all.
Thank you.
I taught painting for years and began my professional life as a painter.
Yeah.
And you had said to me when we were communicating back and forth, and looking at your work now, it's not a surprise that your inspiration, as far as artists go, for folks that are
Mhm.
somewhat knowledgeable on modern art, not surprisingly, was Jackson Pollock, um,
Exactly. Exactly.
whose work, of course, is redefined modern art.
Yeah.
And for folks, I always feel a bit bad for it's kind of a cliche of my kid could have done that, or I just don't get it, or
Right. Right.
anything, as opposed to either you love the stuff or you don't.
Yeah.
I was For me, I was lucky enough from the time I was very young to be taken to the museums in New York, and I just found these wondrous as a kid, and even more so as an adult. Pollock,
Exactly.
who was certainly a tortured guy in many respects and wrestled
Yeah.
with alcoholism and um, a lot of unhappiness and
Yes.
therapy, but at the same time, he he did something that changed art history. He
He
took
did.
the
Yeah.
canvas off the easel and put it on the ground, and rather than conventionally brushstroke it, he dripped or
Yep.
threw paint
Yep.
at it,
Yeah.
what came to be known as action painting.
Right.
And I wondered first how you came to start to paint and why him in terms of inspiration as opposed to any of so many other painters.
Yeah. I think I started painting. I've always loved abstraction, and I've done realism, but I've always generated back towards abstraction. And the more I studied, when I discovered Pollock, when I found out about Pollock's work, it just somehow resonated deep within me because in his work, I saw nature and I saw energy and I saw power and I saw
Energy and
emotion
power for sure.
and I saw the spiritual realm. I saw
Mhm.
the paranormal realm in his work.
It's so
And
interesting you say that. To cut you
yeah,
off for a moment,
that's
what
okay.
I saw, again, returning from being a small boy to an adolescent
Mhm.
to a
Mhm.
teenager, was like the electrical synapses inside of the brain, a
Yes.
zillion
Yeah,
different connections of wires and the
exactly.
like.
Exactly.
And continue on.
Yeah. So I saw that and that inspired me. And I loved the idea of action painting. That really grew on me.
Yes.
And I remember I was sitting at the easel one day, working with a painting knife, and I was working through this passage of this painting, and it just was not working, and you can understand that. And I got frustrated, and there was a glob of paint on the painting knife, and I grabbed the tip of the painting knife and I bent it backwards, and I went out of frustration at the canvas, and the paint flew out in this wonderful, marvelous, spidery pattern. And I went, Aha.
That is one of those moments.
That's one of
Um,
those moments. And
as you
that's,
said it, I visualized that transition moment
yep.
in um, how can I say, in Kubrick's Space Odyssey film,
Yeah. The
where
monolith. Yeah.
where the monkey throws the
Throws the
jawbone up in
book
the
up.
air,
Yeah.
and we cut
Yep.
to the space station, just
Yep.
one of the great aha moments in history.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
I don't know if you're aware, and I'm going to, the audience knows every once in a while I have to completely geek out on art. But I remember with my grandfather, and he died when I was about 9 or 10, so I was still really young. And we're at the Museum of Modern Art. I'm studying one of these big canvases, and I call him
Right.
over. I have found something very exciting, which is a cigarette butt frozen in the paint.
Right.
And
Right.
he said, yeah, he smoked cigarettes, and that one
Yep.
obviously fell. It was like, this is great. The
Yep.
adult world has opened up for me in another way. This guy,
Exactly.
he didn't
Exactly.
even pick it up. This is
Yeah.
so cool.
It's a
Well,
piece of the art. Yeah.
here's the
Yeah.
thing. How did he hit on it? What was his moment? And the fact was, he grew up in Wyoming,
Yeah.
very much an outdoors kid, well, hunting, fishing, but he
Yep.
loved art.
Yeah.
And the artist that he had a chance to study with, one of the greatest American realists of the 20th century,
Yeah.
totally, ultimately drove him crazy with frustration. It was Thomas Hart Benton.
Benton. Yeah.
And Benton was,
Yeah, Benton
again,
was his mentor and his inspiration and his
one of,
frustration and yeah,
well, actually, no, that's actually
that's
still,
Pollock.
that's a Pollock.
That's
But
a Pollock. Yeah.
we have, where's my Benton? I actually pulled a few of them together here.
Yeah. Thomas Hart Benton.
No, that's another Pollock based on Benton.
Yeah. Yeah.
This one really looks like Benton, except, let's just say it, it's not very good.
Yeah.
It's,
Well, it's rough.
yeah.
You know, Benton had more of a polished technique, even in his really swirly stuff, and it was swirly. A lot of
Yes.
it reminds me of Starry Night, you know, Van Gogh,
Yes.
that type of thing.
And
But
what happened, and as an art student, this was so exciting to watch the transition, although for some people it would be like the degeneration. He's getting further and further away from what art should be about, realistic images, and
right.
ultimately coming into what he called pictograms, which
Yeah.
was a form that a number of the abstract expressionists not only kind of hit on simultaneously in the later 1930s, but began to use to communicate with each other
Right.
just for the sake of enjoyment, so to say. And
Exactly.
there is a Pollock realistic painting where there's a slash through it, a paint
Yeah.
slash.
Yeah.
And that's that moment of, not only
Yeah.
am I just experiencing that frustration, but I just did something, a movement that
Yep.
felt much better than holding that little brush and trying to do something that I can't.
To be so confined. Yeah.
The abstract expressionist Adolf Gottlieb, who I had the privilege of being studio assistant to about 50 years ago,
Yes.
he and Pollock used to kind of riff off each other like musicians would.
Yep.
And here we have a painting that is beginning to be this.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
for me and for you, I see it's very exciting.
It is.
There's no conflict between being a professional psychic and being a painter. It's
Exactly.
just another expression. Do you
Another
still,
aspect of the spiritual realm. Yeah.
yeah. Do you still paint with any regularity these days, John?
I do paint. I do photography. I do abstract photography.
Great.
And I do kinetic photography, which is
Huh.
very interesting because you can make light look like a Pollock painting, by throwing the camera around. So that's a very interesting thing. But
Now, I'd like to spend a couple of minutes and talk about your 3 separate books. Talk
Okay.
to us a bit about Writing with Ghosts, Angels, and the Spirits of the Dead.
That was my flagship book. That was my first book I wrote that came out in 2020. And this came about basically because of the inspiration of my producer. When I shot the pilot for the History Channel, my producer and I became friends, and we remain friends. We still are to this day. And unfortunately, the pilot never aired. It never went to series. But we remained friends, and we also remained in a working relationship. And he wanted to try and get me on TV with my gifts because I had made a believer out of him. So he said, look, he said, start a blog and just write a few snippets of the experiences you've had on this blog so that we have an additional tool to refer producers to so they can kind of get an idea of what we're talking about here. And I said, okay. So I've been a biker since I was 15.
Yes.
On my current bike, I rode all over Florida, all over Georgia. I've got 114,000 miles on the bike.
You got to tell us what kind of bike it is.
A Honda VTX 1300C. Yeah. And so I began to have these bizarre, over the top, incredible, even by my standard, paranormal experiences that were related to my rides, my motorcycle rides. And I put a few of those on the blog, and I looked at them and I said, you know, these are so incredible and so meaningful that I've got to expand these into the full story of what happened with each episode, and then collect these together into a book. And that's going to be my psychic legacy. So I did that. And then the second book, Knock in the Attic, that goes back to my childhood and starts with that episode with the old black ghost.
Oh, yeah.
Comes up through my teenage years into young adulthood, all of my moves, the shooting the pilot for the History Channel, so on and so forth, and kind of comes on up into the present day. So in some aspects, it's almost a prequel to Writing with Ghosts. And it was something that I'd knocked around with for a while, pardon the pun, and hadn't really developed. And everybody was asking me, you know, what was it like to grow up this way and blah, 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 blah. So I thought, okay, let's put this into the equation as the complete John Russell, if you will, and put in more incredible paranormal experiences, true experiences, because there's a story in there, a guardian angel experience that people just can't believe. It's just mind blowing. The chapter's titled "A Belated Christmas Miracle," and it really, truly, honestly was. And the people that witnessed this said, "There's no way you could have lived through that. That's impossible." So marvelous things in there.
John, a question. As I've mentioned occasionally on this show, my investigative specialty within the area of UFO studies is the abduction phenomena. It's what I started with. It's what I keep coming back to.
Right.
And I have the experience, I'll say once or twice a year, where I am reminded viscerally, literally, like it goes through me like a shock.
Yeah.
This is really effing happening. This is not some strange psychological aberration. Laid on to a condition called sleep paralysis informed by an overactive imagination.
Yeah.
This is going really on.
This
happening.
is going on. Yeah.
And I can't ever let myself be reduced to thinking of the people that have it happen to them as cases. It's such a dispat. And I hope that stays the same.
Exactly.
You have dealt with your whole life from childhood experiences, in many cases, any one of which would completely rattle the cage of somebody else's life and be so upsetting to them that, it might take an awful lot to help them get themselves together.
Yeah.
Can you give us an example of an experience you have had either pursuing information or working with a client or on your own that has, for you personally, I'm not exactly sure how to say it, gotten completely out of control,
Yeah.
or freaked you out, or
Yeah.
upset you, or kind of made you feel anxious about what have I gotten myself into this time? Something in that
Yeah.
category.
Never, Peter.
Interesting.
I've been, since I was scared by the old black ghost, when I figured out why he came and what was happening, I have never in my life again been scared, ever. Now, I've been startled. If you're in the room in the house by yourself and the doors and windows are locked, you're alone, the alarm's set, and you turn around and there's somebody standing there, that startles you. But then they vanish and you go, oh, okay, it was a ghost. But I've never been startled again or scared again. I've never been frightened of anything. I've never felt that anything was out of control. To the contrary, in my life, I have been literally had my life saved so many times by my guardian angels that it's just an incredible blessing. I've been guided, I've been blessed, I've been protected, I've been helped, and I've been able to help thousands and thousands of clients around the world to lead better lives, to learn how to interact with the spiritual realm and not fear it, and to make their lives better. And for me, the overarching thing in all of this is to teach people not to fear this realm and not to fear these experiences, but to understand that it's a normal part of the construct of living on this earth. People don't understand. If I give them the example that where they are sitting right now listening to us, and where you are and where I am right now, this moment, there are radio waves going through the air around all of us. We don't see them, we don't smell them, we don't feel them, we don't touch them, but they're there. And to prove it, we can plug in a radio, turn the dial, and oh, there's rock music. Turn the dial, go again. There's jazz music. Oh, turn the dial again. There's country music. Guess what? That's always there. And likewise, the spiritual realm, these beings, these angels, our deceased loved ones, various other entities, they're all around us right now, wherever we're at. And it takes that special connection to connect with that and to realize they're there. Sometimes they institute that, they start that connection. Sometimes it's incumbent upon us to do that, but it's always there. And so I try and get people to understand this is the normal condition of the planet. And it's not the ghost hunter shows you see on TV. That's not reality. And there's not a demon behind every bush jumping out trying to get you. Yeah. And there's not this malevolence and this danger and everything that people want you to think is there. That's not how it actually is. And I can state that from, I'm 70 now, for Christ's sakes. And this started when I was 5.5. And I started doing paranormal investigations at age 11, doing psychic readings for friends and family at about 14, 15. Started reading professionally at age 18. And in all of these years, I have not encountered the malevolent, dangerous thing that people want us to believe is out there.
I was not expecting that answer,
Yeah.
of that you've never had that kind of, whoa, what have I gotten myself into?
Yeah.
And it reminded me of only one exchange, which should be flattering for you. I was having, name dropping coming up. I was having dinner with Edgar Mitchell at his home with about half dozen friends.
Yeah.
And it was a particularly rainy night, raining so hard at one point, I kind of hoped we'd all get rained in and have to stay over.
Yeah, talk some more, yeah.
Ed was not just, the seventh man to walk on the moon and amazingly courageous. He was the commander of Apollo 14 and was, although not pictured in the film version, he was in mission control, also trying to help out. But he had a great sense of humor, and I just wasn't sure how to approach what I wanted to say, but essentially it was, at a certain point, you're halfway between the Earth and the moon. You've done it.
Hmm.
The three of you gone, and you're now halfway back.
Yeah.
You're 125,000 miles from the moon and the same
Mhm.
distance from the Earth.
Hmm.
And you're in this container.
This
Let's say it
can.
has, 80,000 little moving parts,
Right. Right.
each one manufactured by the lowest government bidder. And he cut me off. My question was essentially, was there a moment where you kind of had your concerns?
Yeah.
And he read my mind. He said we were too well trained.
Yeah.
Failure was not an option.
Yeah.
It just never would have occurred to us.
Exactly. Exactly.
We weren't, unrealistic. Everybody understood if things went wrong, it would all
The
happen very
consequences.
quickly.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it just wasn't an option. And
Exactly.
that
Exactly.
the other side, so to say, as you've experienced it,
Hmm. Hmm.
is just a place with stuff happening, not malevolent. Um,
Exactly.
can you share a time with us where what you saw, what you learned about a client, helped them really avoid
Yeah.
a tragedy, a life-changing event in the worst possible way, or help them, make a decision that
Yeah.
if they had not made it, could have resulted in an absolute disaster?
Yeah. That's pretty much a constant with a lot of my clients over the years. And the other side shows me things for them to help them avoid negative situations, or at the very least minimize those situations.
Hmm.
And so that's one of the things that's my focus with my clients, and one of my greatest frustrations with my clients, because they'll look at my website, they'll look at my client testimonials, they'll look at my media testimonials, and they'll believe in the veracity of my gift. And yet when it comes down to the nitty gritty of, you need to get away from this person or this situation or this circumstance and do this instead, they're reluctant to do it. And then a lot of times they'll come back and go, John, you told me, I didn't listen. I should have listened. I should have paid attention. And for me, that's the greatest frustration, is in trying to extricate people from those circumstances, or prevent them experiencing those circumstances, and them not having the will, the fortitude, the courage, whatever, to go ahead and follow through with that, and save themselves. And
In
then
your
there
early
are,
reading, in your early readings,
yeah.
when was it that you came upon the life and the work of a true American psychic, Edgar Casey?
Oh, that was way early, when I was a kid. Yeah, when I was a kid, I was reading all of that and investigating all of that. And and I have to tell you, there was a very funny incident. There are things that not only do I try and save people from, harmful situations, life altering situations that I try and protect them from, but there are some comical things that occur. There was a woman that called me, and she said, I don't know what to do. She said, I was watching Sylvia Brown on the Montel show. And she said, Sylvia said, if you want a ghost in your life, ask for a ghost and you'll get a ghost. And he said, that sounded like fun. So I asked for a ghost, and I got a ghost. And now I don't know what to do with it. And it scares me to death. And she said, it began to produce physical manifestations in my house. And I didn't like it. And I told it to leave and to go away. And that seemed to anger it. And she said, I moved, literally sold my house and moved, trying to get away from the ghost, thinking that I would leave the ghost behind, and it followed me. And she said, where I moved, the parking was on the streets. And she said, the ghost was angry at me for trying to move, and it would set off the car alarms in sequence up one side of the street and down the other. And the neighbors said, this has never, ever happened to us before. Not until this crazy woman moved in. She must somehow be doing this or be involved in this. And they called the police on me.
Oh
So
my!
she said, I'm standing on my porch talking to two officers, and the car alarms go off in sequence up one side of the street and down the other. And they look at each other and they look at me and said, don't know what the hell is going on, but she's not doing it. We're out of here. So she said, what do I do? I said, okay, first off, you invited a sentient, emotional, conscious being into your life. It's like going out on the street and there's a stray dog and, oh, get in the car, come home with me. And then you get it home and you go, no, don't want you to throw you back out in the street.
Is that really the way you feel it is?
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
And I said, that's what you've done to the spirit. Hey, come home with me. Oh, I don't want you to get the hell out of here now. And I'm going to move away from you. I'm going to get away from you. And I said, you've hurt this being's feelings. And I said, you know, it followed you. And it's like, okay, get away from me. I'm going to do this. I'm going to set off these car alarms. And I said, okay, here's what you do. I said, now, if this doesn't work, there are other things we can do. But I said, this will work. I said, what you're going to do is you're going to talk to this being. And you said, hey, I invited you. And then I tried to kick you out. And then I tried to run away from you. I'm sorry. And you're welcome here. This is new to me. These experiences are real. They're happening. You're really doing this. And it kind of freaks me out. Take it easy with me. Go slow. And then let's develop a relationship here. Let's have a progression. And I said, ask the spirit, I said, look, when I'm home, watch over me in the home. And if I have to leave the home and you don't go with me, watch over the house. Keep it safe. Make sure nothing bad happens. I said, develop a relationship and a rapport with the spirit. And I said, let the spirit inform your life and be a companion. You've asked for the companionship. Now accept the companionship and let it teach you. Learn from it. Let it learn from you. And I said, if you'll do that, everything will be okay. And it was. So, you know, we have to understand people. I always tell people in my interviews, my books, my readings, I say, look, you want to experience the other side as a 6 foot tall, blue-eyed, blonde, handsome angel with wings. Now, what you may get is this thing that looks like a snaggletooth troll. And you go, oh my God, what is this? Some demonic, malevolent? No, that's just what it is. We don't go out in the ocean and see a lanternfish and go, oh my God, demonic, malevolent. No, that's just a fish. That's just the way it is. We don't look at a cobra and go, oh my God, evil, malevolent, demonic. But no, it's just a snake. That's all it is. It's part of the earth. So you have to understand that there are various beings. I've had a spirit manifest to me as a black, tall monolith with intelligence. I've had spirits manifest in various ways. They're not going to all be the 6 foot tall, blonde, blue-eyed angel with wings. There's lots of entities out there. There's lots of beings. There's lots of representations of intelligence and creation and so on and so forth. Just because it's different looking, don't mean it's malevolent or demonic or evil or whatever. And so you have to understand, when you become serious about investigating, interacting with the other side, you're going to encounter a multitude of beings.
Yeah. Again, in the spirit of people saying to me when I started out, oh, you're into UFOs, are you into, and, you know, going through the whole esoteric list.
Yeah.
Edgar Cayce felt that certain problems, often full physiological problems, a particular cancer or whatever in this life, had a direct relationship to an unresolved situation or a pathology or behavior in a previous life.
Right.
And if you accepted that, even if it was allegorically, and you addressed it with a change in diet or attitude or whatever, it could help you save your life and produce the result you're after. You feel that same way?
I don't. I'm real ambivalent about reincarnation, about past lives, for the simple reason that I've done a lot of research there, and I'm familiar with all the high-profile cases. I've read them, I've studied them, but there's not enough of them to hang your hat on. There's not enough information for me to hang my hat on. And some of these, I look at them and I say, you know, now look, did this kid recall a past life, or is this kid just super psychic like I was and just happened to pick up on something in the atmosphere and, not knowing any better, internalized it and thought, oh, well, that must be me. So,
John, we are actually coming into our last minute. Folks learn more. I know more about you and your work by going to johnrussell.net, and more
Right.
about your books by going to johnrussellauthor.com. Am I correct?
That's correct. That's correct.
John, it has been an absolute pleasure having you on the show. Our
It's
time
been
has
a
just
delight.
gone much too fast.
It has. It has.
We will be in touch, I'm sure. And this is Peter Robbins. The show is Meanwhile Here on Earth. Again, my special guest tonight has been psychic John Russell.
Thank
And
you.
I'll see you next week. And my pleasure, John, truly.
Thank you so much.